just yet. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this live educational session. Excuse me. I'm Grace Bennett, and I'm the social media manager at JDRF. And tonight we are pleased to have Dexcom join us to present managing type 1 diabetes as a college athlete and learn more about living with T1D as an athlete. Amber, a senior at University of Louisville, where she is a dual sport athlete as a starting forward for the soccer team and a steeplechaser for the track and field team. Jessica, a softball pitcher at Providence College, and Bryce, a Division I baseball player at his hometown, Towson University. Dexcom has been a partner with JDRF since 2007. The JDRF and Dexcom partnership aims to work together to empower people to take control of their diabetes. Dexcom U is the first ever name, image, and likeness, or NIL, program for college athletes with diabetes. The program was created in response to a 2022 survey, which found that improving representation for people with diabetes can inspire future generations of athletes living with the condition, to inspire people with diabetes who currently play sports, want to pursue sports, or participate in physical activities, to not let diabetes hold them back. Thank you, Amber, Jessica, and Bryce for joining us. And we're going to start off with some introductions. So Amber, we will start with you. And so can you just tell me what age you were diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and had you started playing your sport yet?
Yes. So I was diagnosed when I was 7 years old. Kind of came out of the middle of nowhere. But I was already playing sports when I was diagnosed. So I was playing Pee Wee soccer, running around. And yeah, it didn't super affect me when I was younger, but I was still able to play sports and stuff. So yeah.
Awesome, thank you. And now we will go on to Bryce. We'll go with you next.
Yeah, I was diagnosed when I was 17, going 18. I was a senior in high school. So obviously I've been playing for a long time before that. They caught it through like a routine blood work check, and it was very slightly above average. There was nothing that was crazy that jumped out about my glucose and all that kind of stuff. So I had to do 3 or 4 tests, and they kind of concluded I had the antibodies that would enact type 1 eventually. It hadn't really started yet, so they kind of caught it before it started. I was already committed to playing college, so I had to go back and talk to those people and kind of figure out what that was going to look like moving forward. But yeah, I was pretty late. Obviously played through it, still played, handled it all in stride and super independently. I got a lot of respect for a lot of the younger athletes that do it in their childhood. And I'm thankful that that wasn't an experience of mine, but yeah, it definitely didn't keep me off track.
Awesome. And then Jessica, will round things out with you.
I was diagnosed when I was 12, and I had already been playing softball for about 7 years, but that was just around when I started pitching. So taking on a different kind of responsibility within softball. It's a little bit different than other positions, but I was lucky enough. Well, I guess not lucky, but my older sister is also a type 1. So my parents had kind of already known kind of what to look for. So started exhibiting some kind of abnormal things for me. Like I was coming back from school and I was sleeping, or like I was at practice and I just couldn't really keep up, which wasn't really like me. Or I complained of like my stomach hurting. My parents thought like, that's really weird. That's not like her. So they took me to get checked out, and they had caught it fairly early, but not bad enough to be in DKA yet. So very thankful for that. But yeah, I was already playing, but kind of like Bryce said, just took it in stride, just made it part of the daily routine, and you make it work for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much again for joining us this evening, and we'll dive into our questions now, so we can go in the same order. We'll start with Amber, and then we'll move on to Bryce, and then Jessica. So the sports that you're playing now, because I know as kids, you do a lot of sports that maybe you don't do in the long run, but the sport that you currently play at the college level, when did you begin to play, and kind of what drew you to the sport and made you say like, okay, this is the sport I want to pursue at the next level?
Yeah. I chose soccer because I had played it my whole life and I just love soccer. So I continued on, started playing club more in high school and got recruited for that. And I first went to play at Oregon State University and I played there for 2.5 years. And then I transferred over to University of Louisville. So I'm here now. But yeah, I did play a few different sports in high school, but I think for me, I just had played soccer my whole life and it kind of felt like the right one for me. And so I continued on.
What about you, Bryce?
Yeah, I was just a fan. Like, I just loved watching baseball. I loved watching the players growing up. I probably started playing with the rec leagues when I was about 5 or 6 years old, and I was always coached by my dad from that time till I was probably 12 or 13. So he was a big help in my development. But I didn't start playing, or I wasn't raised to play at the next level. That wasn't really apparent to me until I was probably about 14, 15, kind of going into high school. Where my fandom and my love and my appreciation for what I had done turned into an opportunity to play into college. So my path was super organic. I'm super thankful that it was that way. There's so many great people that have been around me throughout the whole process. And when they started whispering in my ear that I have a shot to do this longer than I had originally thought, I kind of took advantage of it and really just enjoyed it. But I've always just had a love for the game. And like Amber said, I've played other sports with basketball and football and soccer and some other things, but baseball was the one that I couldn't let that love go, and I thankfully still have it. So that's kind of how my process went.
Awesome. And Jessica, what about you?
I started playing rec ball probably when I was about 5, and I'm the youngest of me and my sister. Our parents only 2 kids, and I looked up to her for everything. So I was playing soccer at the time, and then I started growing, and then I was not nearly as fast. So I was like, oh, I got to look for a different sport. And my sister was playing softball, and I was like, well, obviously I want to do whatever she's doing. So, hopped into Little League, had a lot of fun, loved hitting the ball and getting to run. And, when you're only 5, kids can't throw the ball. So you just keep running, and just having that extra spot outside of school to just have fun and like release all that pent up energy. That's why I love sports. And that's why I love softball in particular, is because it's such a great outlet to kind of just like let loose and like explore a different competitive side of yourself. And probably when I was about 11 or 12, I started pitching, and I used to be a catcher, and I started pitching, and I was like, wow, I love this feeling of like being involved in every single play and having that big of a role within a game. And that's why I love it. I just love competing and, thinking through the whole game of how can I beat this batter, and then getting kind of through there and, just exploring a different side of each part of the game. So whether it's hitting, fielding, running, pitching, whatever it is, it's just a lot of fun. And definitely playing in college has given me a much better appreciation for it, because you get to meet people from all over the country, and recognizing everybody has so many different experiences with the same sport that you grew up playing. And it's like, wow, it's really a universal language that everybody gets to play together.
Well, that actually was the perfect, could not have dreamed up a better setup for our next question. That kind of, anyone who lives with T1D knows that it's very much not at all a one size fits all disease. Even when it comes to, us, I know I can do things one way on a Monday and do the exact same thing on a Tuesday and have wildly maybe different blood sugar levels depending on what's going on. So you all play, Bryce and Jessica, you play similar sports, but you all play different sports. And so are there any challenges? Everybody manages T1D differently. So depending on if you're doing shots or a pump, pricking your finger, you use a CGM. Have you found that there are any kind of challenges with T1D that are specific to your sport, or just even it can be, if there aren't any specific to your sport, just specific to being a college athlete and having to balance academics and all of that stuff as well. You know, kind of those unique challenges that come with college is already overwhelming, and then an extra kind of intense thing happening when you're an athlete in college. So how do you kind of deal with those challenges, things like burnout from just being busy and all that super fun stuff?
Yeah. I would say it's definitely an added challenge. Just from even going to class, you know, like sometimes I'll be running from practice to class, like straight from it, and my numbers will be low and didn't have time to eat lunch, and it kind of throws off your numbers the rest of the day. It's just an added challenge, but one that helps you gain a perspective for, I think, just life in general. So I would personally not ask for it any different, but it is definitely a challenge. I think for me, as far as sports goes, just with soccer, like it's 90 minutes of play, right? So 45 minutes. And if you're starting, then you have to have your numbers perfect by the time the whistle blows. Not perfect, not going to be perfect, but as good as you can before the whistle blows. And then, you know, so you can be mentally at your best, physically at your best. And you have to somehow figure out how to maintain that throughout the 45 minutes if you're not coming off, which is hopefully the goal. And so that for me has been a challenge because my athletic trainer will hold my CGM, and that will be handy. But if my numbers drop or something, I'll have to come out of the game, and you can't re-enter the game until the second half. So it's just it's a bummer when that happens, but trying to figure out how to eat enough carbs before you start the game so that your numbers don't drop too much or spike, totally depending on the amount of adrenaline you get. So it's definitely a juggling match. But I think the other side of that with the long distance running, it can definitely be a challenge with managing numbers because you're running for like 8 to 12 miles and you have to figure out how to fuel for that and make sure your numbers don't drop. And racing is a whole different story because then it's like you can't be like, hey, we can't start yet. I gotta get some, So it's like, yeah, that's kind of a challenge to just make sure that your numbers are primed just for when you're on the starting line and ready to go. I remember one race last year that I had to like put a bunch of gummies and stuff in my shirt, and I was like on the starting line, like pulling them out and like eating them, and it was funny, but it's definitely a challenge. And I think it is like totally different based on the person and the sport and class schedule and sleeping schedule, just all of it. So yeah.
Yeah, I think piggybacking off that last point, I'm most thankful for baseball that way because we don't have the long distance running, and we do have the time when you're out there, the time you're in the dugout, and time between the things that you're doing. So for me, it makes it easier. If I were playing basketball or soccer or lacrosse or football, it'd be a whole different world. So it makes management for me easier that our games are structured and our workload structured the way that it is. In terms of just being a college athlete in general, the biggest thing for guys that I've seen is the weight management. Everybody wants to make weight or gain weight or maintain or lose. So you probably usually, no matter who you are, have a calorie goal per day, whether that's higher or lower, whatever that is. And to meet those calorie goals, you have a pretty good sense of what you got to do and kind of start to form a routine. What I've seen is a lot of my teammates and people can eat before a lift or right after a lift or whatever. But when you got to cover those meals, and exercise usually makes your insulin sensitivity higher. I've seen that I don't really cover before lift. I want to eat before lift, but I'll eat immediately after. Like I have to plan my days and practices and classes around the best times to do that. Usually coming out of a lift, I have to overcover because I'm got the adrenaline headed up anyway. So kind of reading what that all is and what that means, I think is the toughest part, because you do have goals for yourself, whether that be fitness goals or goals with your numbers or whatever else. So that's kind of throughout the day. Being on the field, same thing. My trainer also holds the CGM. He's on my Share app that Dexcom has. So I'll give him a little note. Hey, I just ate something. Keep an eye out, or I just covered. So keep an eye out. But for the most part, I got a pretty good feel of what's going on because we do have that time to check, which again, I'm super thankful for. Other part of baseball that I've taken personally into my routine is I still do the shots. I know the pump will eventually be a game changer, but wearing it with games and sliding and diving and things, I haven't really had the comfort to work that in yet. So I'm still doing shots for that reason, but everything changes and evolves, and just kind of knowing what your schedule is and what's going on is a huge thing. And obviously Dexcom's been a huge help with that. So that's kind of how it looks for me on the challenge and benefit side.
Yeah, and I'd say like,
Thank you.
I would say just in general, like finding what works for each person. So I'm a junior now, my freshman fall, and like getting into lifts and practices and lifts and even conditioning workouts are so different from anything that, you know, you've done at home or your whole time playing the sport. So just finding what really works for you, whether, like Bryce said, it's eating right before or eating right after, or if you have to cover half of the carbs you're eating, just finding what works for you, what makes you the most comfortable, and running from lift to practice and then practice to class and kind of going back and forth, just making sure that your numbers are in the best range for you and what makes you feel the best and keeps you the healthiest. And, you know, you find like my book bag is packed with snacks at all times. Like you'll never catch me without like a granola bar, juice boxes, gummy, the little energy things, water, like no matter what it is, I'm always locked and loaded, ready to go. And, you know, because like Amber said, there's not always time to grab a full meal and, you know, balance everything out, carb, protein, fats, everything to keep your numbers exactly where you want them. But, and it's not always going to be perfect. You know, everybody has this idea of like your A1C is below 7 at all times. And you want your in time range to be 80%. But even if it's 70 one day, if it's 75 one day, like whatever your best is, that's what matters. And it's not always going to be perfect. And as far as softball goes, I'm lucky as a pitcher because I'm not really doing as much running and diving and sliding. So I am on a pump. I use the Tandem T-Slim pump. And usually what I'll do is when I go out for an inning, I'll just disconnect my pump. And then when I come back into the dugout, I'll reconnect, take whatever basal I missed. And usually innings are 10 minutes long when you're on defense about. So it's usually not that long that I'm kind of missing. So it's pretty, fortunately, it's pretty easy to manage as far as softball goes. And then, you know, for lift, I won't wear my pump to lift, but I'll always have my Dexcom on. And my weight coaches, my softball coaches, everything, they've been awesome about, you know, letting me kind of manage my diabetes and kind of keep an eye on everything. And they're super helpful as long as, you know, you invest in those relationships to say like, hey, like, I am a type 1 diabetic. Is it okay if I bring my phone into lift so I can watch my numbers? And, you know, in my experience, they've all been more than willing to help. And, you know, they're all here to help you. Your coaches are there to help you. They're there to watch you succeed. And, you know, diabetes won't hold you back and it won't limit you if you don't let it. So it is an added extra challenge, but it's definitely something that'll make you work harder. It'll make you kind of appreciate even more what you're doing because it is just that much harder. And there's some days where you're like, wow, this really isn't fair and I don't want to do it. But, you know, that's just an added thing that I always reframe it as it's something I get to do because it's made me more resilient. It's made me more, I don't think this isn't a word, but perseverant. It's made me persevere more.
It can be a word.
Yeah, we'll make it word. But yeah, you know, it just makes you a stronger person mentally, even physically sometimes, because you're just working that much harder than everybody else. And, you know, that mental fortitude, that definitely gives you a big edge in competition. So that's one thing that's really helped me at least.
That's awesome. And, you know, I know you've all kind of touched on, whether it's teammates, coaches, whoever it is, kind of having that support system is super critical for everyone who lives with T1D. But I think a lot of times those initial conversations can be kind of uncomfortable. Like Bryce, you were already committed, like you said, when you were diagnosed. So I know there are probably a lot of people out there who would be very nervous if they were in like that type of situation, or even considering kind of trying to play at the next level. So how did you kind of go about having those conversations once you were on campus and met your teammates and coaches, staff, all of that? How did you kind of approach those conversations? Were you nervous? Were you, kind of like, I got this? How'd you kind of bring it up and talk about it with everybody?
Was this specifically for Bryce or was this for everyone?
No, this is for everyone. Sorry. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I would have something to say on that as far as the first few years, like year of college, I tried to do it all on my own and wasn't super connected with my athletic trainer. It's hard because most athletic trainers aren't really trained in diabetes at all, at least from the experiences that I've had. And so kind of just being open with them and educating them on your diabetes and how that's going. I would say for the first year, I didn't do that very well. And so I did struggle a lot trying to manage everything on my own. And then I started to realize that there's just no way I can do it on my own. So bringing in those support people and really like having them there to help you dive into how you can make the routine better. Like when you're on traveling trips, is there something for dinner that you maybe shouldn't eat when everyone else is eating the same thing, or that kind of thing. Just being super open and honest with your coaching staff and athletic trainer, and just whatever family or support system that you might have. I think for me, that really changed the burnout that I was facing with diabetes at the college level. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the initial conversation for me was a little bit easier. I went down to, like I said, between the commitment and me showing up, met with the head coach and our strength coach and our athletic trainer down in Radford was my first school. And they had a pretty good understanding of what was going on. There was a volleyball player there, Steph Neist, who was 2 or 3 years older, that was dealing with the same thing. So they obviously knew her case, and she was phenomenal for me because I was still in my first year of dealing with it. So she was a wonderful role model. When I transferred back here, same thing. The athletic training staff here is phenomenal. I don't say that lightly at all. They're really good at what they do. And obviously I've grown close to ours. Sometimes I forget to turn my share off and I'll be home and his phone will go off at 8 p.m. He's texting me like, hey man, eat a Snickers. I always feel so bad that I left the share on. But the conversations are funny too, especially with teammates. You're in the locker room and it's got you on your arm, on your abdomen, wherever you're wearing your Dexcom, and the questions are, what is that? And you kind of talk through it. But some of the questions of, can you eat that? Or what are you injecting? Or, all those things, you got to kind of take those in stride as just being funny, because people's ignorance isn't really a rude thing. They just don't know. So sharing those things with teammates, and especially the ones who care, is a cool thing. But I'm usually not the one to bring it up to them first. I think having their curiosity come to me is a little bit funnier. But everybody's super understanding and really mature about it. And that's kind of what you find at this level, is everybody has different things that they go through, whether it be type 1 for some of us or a number of different things. So everybody kind of respects that everybody has their own routine and their own business and handles it how they need to. So at this level, it's been awesome. And like I said, it's make it funny. Don't get too too emotional about people's lack of understanding. It has always been my biggest piece of advice.
Yeah, and I'd say the same kind of thing, you know, not everybody is super educated in everything. Just like if somebody else is going through something different, like I might not know about it, but always kind of approaching it with an open mind. And whether it's your coaches who might be like, oh yeah, like my mom had that, and you're like, oh, that's cool, but they're like, oh yeah, she took insulin like once a day, and you're like, oh, like I'm fully dependent on insulin. Like it might be a little bit of a different understanding, but kind of like Bryce said, like they just don't know. And not a lot of people that you meet are going to be like, oh, you have type 1, like what kind of pump do you use? Like it'll kind of vary with who knows how much about type 1. And you know, it like they both said, just taking it in stride, and you know, taking those opportunities to educate people and really just kind of spread the word about type 1, because it is not very well known. If somebody says diabetes, I think the common thought is type 2. So if you get a bunch of questions about that, I think everybody has, it's pretty normal. But one of my favorite things about the conversations I've had with my teammates or my roommates, anything here at college, is that like they'll ask me, I'd be like, how are your numbers today? And like just something like that is just something so small that it's like, wow, like I have so many people here that like are rooting for me and are trying to help me be successful and help me be just healthy overall. And like once you find that kind of group of people that, you know, like my direct roommate has my numbers on the Follow app, so in the middle of the night both of our phones are going off, and just knowing that people here have my back, that definitely makes a big difference. Even my parents have my numbers on their Follow app for Dexcom, so I'll get texts in the middle of the night like, come on, check your sugar, like let's go, get it together. Just something small like that, just knowing that whether I'm here, whether I'm at home, whether we're on an away trip, like everybody's always helping me in some way. And, you know, even having those conversations with your coaches of like, hey, you know, like I had a rough night last night with my blood sugar. It was up, it was down. Like I woke up 8 times, no matter what it is. And just being like, I'm giving you all I got, coach, whether it's something like that, or if it's, hey, like I really don't feel good, and you just got to sit out for 5 minutes until you can get back into it. Just having those really candid conversations make a big difference, because if you don't tell somebody, they can't help you. So I would say just advocating for yourself and, you know, being open to educating others.
Yeah, it's yeah, it can be tough to advocate for yourself sometimes, because I know I get worried. I'm like, oh, are they going to say something? Or but I know when I went to college, and I'm dating myself because this was long before the days of CGMs or anything like that. I know I went across the country for college. I was not an athlete, but I did go very far away from college. So I'm not, you know, don't want to ruin anybody's cool factor, but how do you kind of deal with, because when you're not feeling well, or you're overwhelmed, or you're kind of having that burnout, you know, a lot of people are going to want to be like, I want my mom and my dad, and I want to be in that kind of like place. I know, you know, no doubt that I'm safe and taken care of. So I would imagine there's some parents as well that would find these answers comforting. So how do you guys kind of make sure, you know, in making that transition with your parents, it can be sometimes hard for them to let go in general with college, but especially when something like T1D is also a factor. So how do you kind of balance making sure your parents know you're good with obviously everything else the three of you have going on?
Yeah, I would say the Dexcom Share app is a game changer for sure. My mom has my numbers on her phone, so she will definitely text me, especially at night. I think it's good just to have that support. And my roommates all are aware of it as well, so that helps my parents kind of feel better about it, that there's always someone around. And I think just, yeah, for me, it's mainly just the share out. My parents are pretty, they're pretty laid back, honestly. But I mean, I have been dealing with it for almost 15 years now. So they have kind of been able to kind of take their hands off more. But I do remember when I was first going to college, it was more of a stressor for them. But just knowing that, with the team, it's kind of nice because you have like a built-in support system that, like at least during the day and like even when you come home at night, you're going to have someone around that if you need help with something, you can reach out to. So that's been nice as well. But yeah.
Yeah, I think my late diagnosis kind of helped here because I was leaving for college in 6 months anyway. So, and like I said, it hadn't fully kicked in yet. So when it did, I was kind of on my own with figuring things out. And that's, obviously my parents let it be that way. And in that time of uncertainty, I kind of had to more be their rock for one time in my life than they were for me. So how I've handled it is always between me and myself for the most part, in terms of the day in, day out. And I've kind of let them not have to worry about it as much. But I am also 20 minutes down the street from where they live, being in my hometown. So we are still pretty connected. I'll go out for dinner every now and again. But the benefit of being in school where you're kind of from is that your doctors don't change, your resources don't change. So anything I do need prescription wise or appointment wise, ever I can handle, within the week. So that's a huge benefit that kind of eases everybody's mind too. They're not on my share out, my parents aren't. It's only my trainers. So I've lived down here at school for the last 3 going on 4 years, and I've handled a lot of this stuff independently. Doesn't work for everyone. I'm not saying it's the right way, but the benefit of being diagnosed at a later age was that I had to handle this all on my own anyway. So there was no transition of power from them handling it to me handling it. That's kind of how it's been the whole time. And like I said, they're right around the corner. So their worry levels, I think, are generally pretty low, but you'd have to ask them for sure.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing for my parents, because both me and my sister are both type 1, is like we lean on each other a lot. So like if one day I'm like, my sister's name is Sam, I'm like, Sam, like I really don't want to do this today. She's like, no, like you got it. Like you can do it. So a lot of times me and her will talk about diabetes. We'll send each other like funny diabetes jokes, whatever. And with my parents, like I just let them help as much as they want to, because I know that it's a big worry on them. And even if sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, like another text, come on. But I know it's making them feel a lot better. And I'm only about 6 hours away from home. So if something really dramatic were to happen, I know that they could still come and, be with me. But as far as day-to-day things go, they know I have great friends here, great coaches, great trainers, everything that are always keeping an eye out for me. I have great roommates. Even professors have asked me, because I'll introduce myself to a professor and tell them, like, hey, like, I'm really sorry, but like I have a couple medical devices. They might beep. I try to keep it to a minimum. But just the network, especially in my school, I'm sure it's very similar to other schools, but just a great community of people. And there's also different clubs you can join too that are whether it's like, I think College Diabetes Network is a big one, or I'm sure other schools have independent groups, but just finding where your support lies. And when your parents learn that your friends are asking you, like, did you cover for that meal or whatever it is, like it'll make them feel a little bit better. And yeah, I let them help as much as they want to, even if it bothers me sometimes, or if I really don't want to have another notification on my phone. I know it's helping them. So just always, letting them do what they think is best. And yeah.
Yeah, my mom was deprived, Dexcom share wasn't a thing until it became a thing. And when I got on it, she'd text me, I'd be like between 80 and 70. She'd be like, have you eaten? And, I'm like, I didn't suddenly forget how to treat a low after doing this for like 17, 18 years, but I appreciate the concern. So speaking of lows, now we're going to get into the hard hitting stuff. What is your go-to low snack? And I'm not talking like low, like convenience wise, like what is your ideal favorite go-to way to treat a low?
That's a good one. Honestly, nothing hits more than like a low snack. If I could choose, I'd probably have like a homemade peanut butter and jelly. That just sounds so good when I'm low. But if I don't have that, then I'll go for like, we always have Uncrustables around for training and stuff like that. So it's a close second. Uncrustables are pretty good, toasted for sure. But if not that, then I love me a good go-go squeeze. Those are always clutch.
Yeah, I guess ideally, well, I'm a big dessert guy, so I always have Oreos around. I guess that's usually it. Convenience sake, fruit snacks. I used to do a lot of like the Gatorade and apple juice stuff, but I realized like fruit snacks are a little bit cheaper and you get way more. So to have that around is a better budgeting choice. It lasts a little bit longer and has the same results. So usually it's fruit snacks, but if I have my ideal pick, it'd be a stack of cookies for sure.
Yeah, I'm a big Airheads girl. That's usually where I go to first. I got a whole like cup of them over by my bed, and I'll just reach over middle of the night, crack one open. Pretty convenient, pretty easy. Whether it's in the middle of the class and I'm trying to like sneakily open the wrapper so I'm not like disrupting something, and then I'm like, me trying to do this quietly is like louder than it would be if I just ripped it open. But either those, or if I have a low and I'm about to go to practice or lift, I'll usually go for like peanut butter crackers, because that way you're getting a little bit of protein with it too, and then that kind of keeps you a little bit more stable. So that's usually what I'll go to if we're going to practice or conditioning or lift or something like that. But if it's just I'm walking to class and I'm going low, it's usually an Airhead.
Awesome. That's like one of the more personal questions you can ask someone with T1D, I feel like, is their preference, because it's very personal. So this will be our final question for all three of you. What advice would you give to younger athletes who are maybe headed into high school or already in high school, who are worried that T1D might hold them back from competing at the next level and are maybe feeling kind of discouraged and like they can't do it? What would be each of your kind of words of wisdom for someone in that kind of headspace?
I would just give my whole heart to you to say, don't give up, because if that's what you want to do, like, there is absolutely no reason that you can't. It's gonna be hard, and it's gonna be a lot harder than maybe another person's journey, but everyone has their own struggles. So I think just embracing that challenge, it kind of gives you a deeper purpose. And I think, speaking from experience, it's not giving up and pursuing college sports has just been an absolute experience for me. I think the people that I've met, the experiences that I've had traveling, and just like getting to know myself at a whole different level, and continuing to grow in myself. I don't think that there's a better way to do it than to challenge your fears. So yeah, my favorite quote is, don't let it break you, use it to make you. And that one kind of keeps me going, because whenever it gets super hard, I just know it's going to make me that much better on the other side. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think while we're dropping quotes, I'll throw in the only constant in life is change. And whether you're dealing with sport or life or business or diabetes, whatever it is, there's always going to be change. So the biggest piece of advice that I've given anyone is just to stay as consistent as possible. I do the same things all the time, but make a routine of what you're doing, and have a pretty good general idea of what that looks like. Obviously, you're not eating the same meals every day. You're not on the same schedule all the time. I get it, but take note of the things that work well, and kind of try to repeat them as much as possible and kind of get a good feel for what that looks like. That's great baseball advice or sport advice too. When you're playing well, have a good idea of why and what the foundation is. And then, when you're dealing with your levels changing and highs and lows and things you didn't expect, and things coming from all over the place at all different angles, kind of get back to what you know works. And if you don't know what that is, that's completely fine, but at least give the effort to try to figure out what it might be and just be as consistent as possible. Routine is so huge for any college student, college athlete with diabetes. They all take routines different ways, but they're all so important to each one at many different levels. Like I always kind of tell people, if you're a college athlete, you're not a college student. If you're a college athlete with diabetes, you're not a college athlete. So you're all doing different things, and don't try to be like anybody else. Do what's best for you, the most consistently that you possibly can. And it should work out. It's worked out for a lot of people, so it should definitely work out for you.
Yeah, and I think too, kind of Bryce touched on it, but not everybody's management of diabetes is going to look the same, and what works for one person definitely won't work for the other. And diabetes is only part of what you do. It's just like that extra little thing you think about. And like, you're an athlete with diabetes, you're not just a diabetic, or you're not a diabetic athlete. It's just like that extra little thing you deal with. So if you don't let it define you, it won't. And if you don't let it hold you back, you won't. It's a little bit of extra hard work, but if you want to play at a higher level, you can't be afraid of that anyway. So, it's just that extra little thing that pushes you every day. And, if you can play high school sports, if you can play really competitive club sports, if you can play college sports with diabetes, there's not much that you can't do, because if you're juggling all of that, it builds you up into such like a strong, like, a lot of mental fortitude. It comes with all of that. And, practicing what works best for you, and then really implementing that, and that will change. What works best for you one day won't work best for you another day, and that's fine. And even if it's from year to year, what works for me now as a junior didn't work best for me as a freshman. So being ready to adapt, and not settling.
Awesome. Well, that's all fantastic advice, I think, just across the board for anyone. So Amber, Jessica, Bryce, thank you so much for joining us tonight, taking the time to do this and sharing your experiences and your insights. And thank you to Dexcom for getting us all together this evening. We hope you found the program inspiring and informative. And thank you all in the audience for joining us and tuning in tonight. And just as a reminder, JDRF does not endorse products, brands, or services. And we appreciate your time and encourage you to visit jdrf.org, where you can find a ton of educational materials about balancing life while managing type 1 diabetes. Have a great evening.